that sort of thing, we are no longer doing it. It used to be like once per month, but we switched it to a more like
More occasional.
yeah. So we have like in recent years there was a major push towards like creating formal research clusters. So these research clusters tend to do their own negri, I mean the philosophers.
Uh-huh. Sure.
One of the research clusters invited him, but the truth is that he, I mean, this
Where is he based now?
I don't
He
know.
retired in 1990.
I
I don't
really
know. He
don't
must
know.
have lived in the 70s, I guess. But I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I but I also don't know where he is now. But he comes quite often to Brazil.
Uh-huh.
He has been coming to Brazil for the several past years, and yeah, last year I attended one. It was really interesting, really good, but because he's trying to relate to the local situation, so it's not a broader speech, political speech, but it was quite interesting, and of course, I mean, it was already we were already looking for answers and looking to him to provide answers. I was like, I'm not a local economist, but the fact is that when we had this monthly seminar, we had problems of sometimes it's really difficult to get to people, and it doesn't. I mean, we discussed with them. Like if you don't want, we are doing this for them. If they don't want to attend,
Is that something acceptable for them?
yeah, yeah,
Because what they usually do have some sort of issue with low attend also, and then, but we expect primarily PhD students to come as well. But then what they did is that they did a program, mandatory program. They have to attend every part occasionally for the mandatory part.
yeah. Actually, the thing is here. It's sort of mandatory, but like they need to complete a number of hours, so they can choose.
Uh-huh.
And I guess because we are already heading to the final month of the calendar year, the educational calendar year, most of the people already accumulated
They
their
are.
mandatory hours, so it gets more
All
difficult.
right. So now I understand.
Yeah.
I get it.
When I was a PhD student, I had to attend all of because we had this
Yeah.
monthly events, and I had to attend them all. And I mean, I don't know, I liked it. I mean, the PhD is this momentum, formation is wildly important. Something.
Education
Yeah.
is effective or not. They've done here a study in two states in Brazil. I think one was Mato Grosso, but I don't remember the other one. Several schools from the third grade to the ninth grade with control groups and everything. And the outcome was that, yeah, it's effective in the end, especially in seventh grade, ninth grade. So they learn a lot about, savings and problems, manage money, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. But when it comes to transform and turning this formal knowledge into habits,
Mm-hmm.
this where they fail. So in other words, they can learn very well all the abstract formal concepts or whatever, but they don't implement them they don't use them in their own life. They know that it's not good to be in debt, it's not good to,
Yeah.
to max
Yeah.
your credit card,
Yeah.
but then they go and max the credit card.
So
So,
common. Yeah.
so basically the lesson was that this formal financial education is not effective in the end, so we need to look somewhere else. It just doesn't work. I mean, it works, but they learn the notions and
They.
whatever, but they don't apply them. They don't.
It's funny how they.
the presentation was in Portuguese, but the slide were in English, so I hope they looked at the slide and they understood that it doesn't work.
Did they have the translation?
Well, there was translation there. Of course, there was translation, but we didn't actually need the translation very much. All you have to do is look at the slide.
Yeah, there's a lot of jargon, so, well, I think that where do you want to see it actually? The search here or there?
Probably there, but I'm going to scan.
Okay, sure. I was just reminded that you need to use the microphone because
Got it. Got it.
you can
But I probably should overwork. Oh, right. Okay. Fine. Sure.
abide to the rules. Gente, boa tarde. Do you mind if I do this in Portuguese? Just I'm introducing and speaking nice words about you. Então, boa tarde, obrigado a todos por virem. É meu prazer apresentar aqui o professor Alex Preda e thank you very much for accepting this invitation to talk to our academic community. Eu vou mudar de língua aqui. É importante registrar, o professor Alex Preda está em São Paulo a convite da Conferência de Ciências Comportamentais e Educação do Investidor, que é organizada conjuntamente pela Comissão de Valores Imobiliários, pela B3, a antiga bolsa, Bovespa, atualmente B3, e pela Ambima, Associação de Bancos de Investimento. Ele vai estar, inclusive, amanhã nessa conferência, quarta-feira pela manhã, na Bolsa de Valores, no centro de São Paulo. E eu gostaria, então, de agradecer essas organizações por trazerem o professor Preda e permitirem que ele também viesse à Universidade de São Paulo e compartilhasse um pouco dessa pesquisa recente com vocês. Para aqueles que não conhecem, o professor Alex Preda é professor de contabilidade, accountability e administração financeira na King's, na Escola de Negócios do King's College de Londres. Antes, ele trabalhou na Universidade de Edinburgh e na Universidade de Constance. Ele tem um doutorado, um PhD pela Universidade de Bielefeld. Nas últimas décadas, na verdade, o professor Preda vem realizando pesquisas sobre a formação social histórica dos mercados financeiros, em especial sobre a formação dos atores que povoam esses mercados financeiros, investidores, com um interesse bastante especial nos investidores não institucionais, os pequenos investidores, né, como historicamente eles foram formados. Ele é uma das principais figuras na construção desse campo dos estudos sociais das finanças, esse novo campo dos estudos sociais das finanças. No último ano, ele publicou um livro chamado, para quem ainda não viu, vale muito a pena, chamado Noise, Living and Trading in Electronic Finance, que é um livro bastante fascinante, investigando as estratégias e os sentidos do envolvimento não lucrativo de pequenos investidores nos negócios de electronic trading. Atualmente, ele é pesquisador em um projeto de 5 anos financiado pelo European Research Council chamado Evaluation Practices in Financial Markets, trabalhando com outros colegas da Universidade de Edinburgh e da London School of Economics. E hoje ele vai nos falar sobre o projeto atual de pesquisa individual dele em Hong Kong, So many thanks again, and the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you, Andre, for inviting me to meet with sociologists here at the University of Sao Paulo. I should say that, thank you for being here, first of all. Despite my title, at King's College London, my background is in sociology, so this talk is going to be sociological through and through. It's going to have some numbers, but not a lot of numbers. Actually, it's just the first slide. And its title is Financial Facework, Professional Hybridization, and the Competition for Capital Flows in Financial Markets. I'm going to explain in a minute what I mean by facework and by hybridization and by competition for capital flows in financial markets. I'm also sure that you've recognized this notion of facework from Goffman's interaction ritual. I'm going to talk more about this. So what I'm going to say tonight is based on ethnographic work I have been conducting for the last 2 years and a half in Hong Kong. And let me give you first the setting. So Hong Kong, so that I assume that you're not very familiar with financial markets in Hong Kong. If you are, stop me. So it's the largest stock exchange worldwide. It has a market capitalization of $4.2 trillion, US dollars. And what distinguishes Hong Kong and other Asian markets, financial markets, from, this Western style, Western European, North American financial markets, is that the participation of the adult population in investments is much higher. In Hong Kong, for instance, we have a percentage of, and these are the official numbers, right? 36% of the adult population are stock investors. And the median frequency of investments is 10 transactions per year, which is quite high. It means that they do a lot of financial transactions in financial markets. But they also, it's not the highest in Asian countries. In Taiwan or in Japan, the proportion of the adult population who participate in financial markets is even higher. And they also have a very high average household savings rate. As you can see there, over 20 years, the average household savings rate was over 29%, which is quite high, but not the highest in Asia. All these are official figures, right? And in addition to that, we also have significant capital flows coming from mainland China. Hong Kong is the largest offshore market for RMB. The total volume of RMB deposits, so that's the renminbi, the Chinese, the currency from mainland China, right, is $500 billion, which is also quite high. And in addition to this, in mainland China, it is estimated, these are not official figures here, right, about mainland China, only the others are official figures, because here we have only estimates. There are 1.6 million high net worth individuals, and the definition, the formal, official definition of a high net worth individual is somebody who has at least $1.5 million in assets. So if you try and multiply 1.6 million by $1.5 million, you get an idea of how much money is there, right? I'm giving you all this information because it's relevant in relationship to what comes now, right? And this is the only slide with numbers. So, and now to my main question. I have a very simple question now I'm looking at here, namely, how is money transformed into financial capital? Because we know that money is not capital. You can put money under the mattress, you can leave coins under the sofa, you can bury a suitcase full of money in the garden, you can buy a house, a flat, and so on and so forth. we shouldn't start from the premise that every money is capital. And if you look at, money, money is not capital, but we do have financial capital there, then we need to have some transformation, some process through which money is transformed into financial capital, because it's not automatically financial capital. And it's not automatic. This sort of transformation is not univocal. So you don't go straight from money into financial capital. You can transform money into real estate capital. You can transform money into industrial capital. You can transform money into commercial capital and other varieties of capital, not necessarily financial capital. And if you look at the classical story here, the classical story is a story of accumulation. We accumulate capital. We know this from Marx, right? But this doesn't address the problem of transformation. So we know that it's accumulated, yeah, but you need to have a transformation before that. And this transformation of money into financial capital, you know, you can look at it as an issue of isolated individual choice. And many economists would see it as a problem of making choices, right, as an individual. Or if you're Max Weber, you can look at it perhaps as a story of your relationship with divinity, you know, a particular set of ethical norms which inform your relationship with divinity. But you can also look at this transformation as an interactive process, right, namely between capital groups and their audiences. So you can see it as a sort of competition among various capital groups which fight over the transformation of money or disposable money into various types of capital. And financial capital is one among these types, right? And if we look at the transformation as an interactive process, then we need to look closer at the formats of this interaction, which can be technologically mediated. And we also need to look closer at the social interactions through which money is captured and then steered into particular forms of capital. I'm saying all this in order to introduce my focus. And my focus is the interactive process, or better said, the interactive processes taking place between capital groups and their audiences, right? And my setting is Hong Kong. And now let me show you an empirical puzzle. What happened over the last 15 to 18 years in Hong Kong, but not only, is that we see we witnessed the emergence of a new professional class and the emergence of a set of new professional activities called financials. And the new professional class is called financial actors. Financial actors are professionals. They're institutionalized. They have their own institute. They're established. They're acknowledged by other professional groups in the financial services in Hong Kong. But they mostly, some of them even exclusively, do just one thing, namely finance shows on television, on radio, and on the internet. You have here a shot. I spent a lot of time in TV and radio studios, observing how these shows are produced, but also talking to financial actors, TV producers, TV anchors, fund managers, financial analysts, and so on and so forth. And you see here, this is from a show called The Money Cafe, very popular. It's broadcast every day, and it's just one show among many. And there are about 100 financial actors in Hong Kong. This is very significant because it's just a city. It's a large city. It's a financially very significant city, but in the end, it's just a city, right, of about a little less than 8 million people. And you can see the studio here. I'm going to talk more about it. So these are the financial one financial actor and the anchor and the cameraman. But if you turn the camera around, on this side You see here, on this side, you produce towards us, which is unoccupied, you produce some broadcast financial news, which are completely different from finance shows. I'm telling you this, so many TV studios use exactly this format because it's very cheap. Doesn't cost much to produce shows, so they have a vested interest in that. I'm going to talk more about it a little later. The mere existence of these finance shows is at odds with what we heard in the recent years from a number of academic colleagues from sociology, from anthropology as well, from cultural studies as well, saying that, contemporary finance is an abstraction which colonizes public spaces in the form of abstract numbers, very difficult to comprehend. This is another photo taken on the street in Hong Kong, and you can see that in some places they have these giant screens where they project, all the stock prices and the changes in real time, and you can see it's not up there. It's very easy to observe. It's right at street level. But this sort of abstract projections are a little at odds with what is going on in the TV studio, where it's not so much about abstraction, it's about a show, right? And it's also, these finance shows are a little at odds with what has been argued in recent sociological and anthropological works based on actual trends, right? Namely that the shift to electronic finance has emptied the trading floor. You can see here, this is the trading floor of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Nobody's there. It's just for show. It serves only as a backdrop for TV anchors when they do financial news. And it's only for tourists to come and see, but there's no trading inside. It's all electronic, right? So we don't have any lively interactions anymore. We don't have any shouting, any masses of traders, nothing like that. It's completely empty. It's used as a backdrop, and the argument has been, well, finance has become more and more abstract, more and more difficult to comprehend, and this sort of increasingly abstract character has distanced finance from at least lay audiences, has made finance into something esoteric and difficult to comprehend. Well, this is somehow at odds with the existence of these financial actors who are actually performing shows on finance. There are three, actually, if you look at how locals talk about them, there are three terms used commonly. One is financial actor. The other one, very colloquial, is famous mouth, and this emphasizes you're not just talking about something and you're famous because you talk. And the other one is more formal, is stock commentator. So the denomination of the name of the professional institute is Hong Kong Institute of Stock Commentators, but actually, if you look at how people talk about these financial actors, they use either famous mouth or financial actor here. So what are these actors doing? Are they conveying information to audiences? Are they analyzing financial data for the benefit of audiences? These shows run continuously. And they are broadcast by by all main TV channels, all main radio stations in Hong Kong, and on the internet as well, and on the social media as well. So you'll have also shows like this on Facebook, for instance. Is this conveying financial information? Actually, not really, simply because, first, the financial news with every news hour, within every program. So why do you need an extra show, an additional show, if you already got financial news? Is this analysis of financial data? No, not really, because they don't analyze anything, and because there are other programs where they do this sort of analysis. Also, if you look at the format of these shows, they have a variety of formats which have nothing to do with, conveying information or with analyzing anything. They have comedy shows on finance. They have game shows on finance. So why do you need a comedy show or game show to convey anything when you already have financial news as a separate format? But the variety of formats, as I said, comedy, game shows, chat shows, talk shows, a lot of them. This variety of formats is meant to convey a positive social value of the financial actors, and also a positive social value of finance. I'm going to say more about how this happens. So this puzzling empirically, why do we encounter such financial activities and professions centered on or established professions, I mean institutionalized professions, recognized as such by other professional groups within the financial services industry? Why do we encounter them? Why are they doing what they are doing? And how is this consequential, for instance, with respect to financial transactions? Is it pure entertainment for lack of better option? But that would be difficult to admit because there are so many entertainment options around. Why do you do this when there are so many possibilities around? It's not that we are lacking entertainment, and it's not that Hong Kong is devoid of any entertainment. Quite the contrary. All right. So let me approach this empirical puzzle from three different theoretical perspectives. One theoretical perspective is focused on the concept of Facework, coming from Goffman, the interaction ritual, in relationship to strategic action in markets. Then the second theoretical perspective is looking more at expert knowledge and how professional identities are built in finance. And finally, a third perspective looks at this notion of financialization, which has been very much debated over the past, maybe 10 to 15 years. But I'm not going to talk about all aspects of financialization now because that's way too broad. I'm going to focus only on two of them: the financialization of the firm and what is called financialization of everyday life or financialization from below, right? So let me start with the first theoretical perspective: Facework and strategic action. And we all know from Irving Goffman's work, he develops this concept of Facework, starting, if you've read, and we all have read his chapter on Facework from the interaction ritual, he starts by analyzing this notion of saving face or keeping face, and argues that having a face implies actually interaction work. And this face constitutes our identity with respect to others. And it's intrinsic to the constitution of the self. But it's not only work, so it's interactional work. We constitute our identities and ourselves by interacting with other people. And in these interactions, we have to keep something constant. And that something is our face, right? The way in which we appear to others. But at the same time, this face works, so it's not automatic, it's not given, we cannot assume it as being self-evident. We all have to work for it. At the same time, face work can become a strategic resource in action, in the sense that when this face work is contested, we deploy particular strategies and we deploy particular repair actions, among others. But face work can be also used strategically, for instance, in attracting resources from audiences. For instance, we want their attention, or we want something from our audiences, and then we deploy particular Facework actions. So if this is so in everyday life, then we can make, it's not unreasonable to make the argument that Facework can be deployed as a strategic resource in trying to obtain something from the audience. For instance, in this work of transforming savings coming from the audience into capital flows in finance. So one problem here is, how do we look at Facework as being intrinsic to this process of capturing capital flows from the audiences? Right? If the audiences have savings, then we capture them and we transform them in this interactive process into financial capital. But in order to do this, we have to deploy Facework. Well, Goffman argues in this paper that Facework requires expressive displays. So when we are doing Facework, we put emphasis on expression and on emotion, and knowledge, the knowledge we use, we deploy in these interactions is primarily expressive. So it's not abstract knowledge, it's very practical, and it has to do with how we express ourselves towards others, which makes sense, right? Because in every interaction we have, when we do this Facework, we use expression. So we cannot have Facework without expression, because we are perceived by others and valued and judged by others according to the expressions we put on. So the takeaway point for me here is this primacy, if you want to put it like this, of a particular kind of knowledge in Facework, namely expressive knowledge. Well, second theoretical approach, expert knowledge and professional identities. We had in the sociology, in economic sociology and the sociology of financial markets over the years, actually over more than a decade now, almost 2 decades, right? An emphasis on financial expertise and an emphasis on the cognitive dimension of this expertise and on technology. And this expertise on this emphasis, on the cognitive dimension of financial expertise chimes in very well with what we observe happening in financial markets. This drive towards agilization, towards abstraction, towards mathematical models, the emphasis on information processing, the prominence of professions related to information processing in financial markets, such as financial analysts or financial journalists. And we know from a number of significant works how these professions had emerged. For instance, Mary Poovey has worked on financial journalists. There are several sociologists who have worked on financial analysts and anthropologists, like Stefan Leins, Leon Vansleben, and many others who have emphasized this process of historical emergence of these professions related to information processing in finance. And as a sort of corollary of all this, of this entire analytical take we have witnessed, is that critiques of finance have very often centered on failures of calculation. When it comes to analyzing, for instance, and explaining financial crises, we have this entire direction of research emphasizing limits and failures of calculation. Right? So over the years we had, at least in a particular stream of research, this kind of emphasis, I don't want to say now overemphasis, but emphasis on the cognitive dimension of financial professions, right? However, over the last decades, we also had a number of ethnographic works showing that actually you cannot separate, when it comes to financial transactions and when it comes to interactions, you cannot separate emotions and expression from cognition. And you cannot drive this sort of hard wedge between cognitive expertise and expressive expertise, because in the process of trading markets, not only in financial markets, of course in other kinds of markets as well, we know very well these two dimensions cannot really be separated. They depend on, they reinforce each other, so they play together. And taking this into account, it would make sense for us not to look at, for this particular case of financial actors, not to look at expressive knowledge as being separated completely from expert knowledge on finance, from the cognitive dimension, but as having a particular dynamic together. Right? So first, a theoretical take. Financialization. As I said before, I'm not going to talk about all aspects of financialization because we would have to probably spend something like an entire term, an entire semester talking only about that. But I'm going to focus on two of them, financialization of the firm first and then financialization from below. Now, if we look, summing up, if we look at the financialization of the firm, the argument has been, well, over the past decades, at least since the 1980s, firms, corporations have been put under pressure by financial markets. And this has led to particular professions becoming prominent in corporations, such as the chief risk officer, the chief financial officers, professions which before were marginal at best before the 1980s. And now they have taken center stage in corporation. So, and that's one aspect of the financialization of a firm. The other aspect of this financialization process is that financial activities have become a major center of profit for the firm, for firms or corporations which are not financial corporations. What is meant here in the first place is that industrial corporations have moved financial activities to their core while remaining industrial corporations. Well, if we accept this argument, then why should we think that the media industries have been left untouched by financialization? We should see the same kind of processes in the media industries where, for instance, representations, or better said, performances of finance are made into a center of profit. In a way similar to which, for instance, a car manufacturer can make lending money into a center of profit, a TV station can make finance shows into a center of profit. Right? But this requires also a particular type of combination of expressive expertise with financial expertise, if you want to put it like that. And therefore, we should expect to see the emergence of hybridized professions here, which are driven exactly by this financialization of the media industries. So if we move then over to this notion of financialization from below, the argument has been here that financialization from below means not only the emergence of financial products tailored to ordinary individuals, to ordinary citizens, but also a drive to make finance and financial investments palatable and attractive to ordinary individuals. And that means that, among others, for instance, that financial products are made to appear to audiences as likable as everyday life products. And this might be true. This might have something to do with this financialization of the media industries. Let me give you an example. This is also a photograph I took in Hong Kong. It's one of, you see here, on a taxi in the street. This one of the most prominent financial actors advertising for new mobile app for Citibank, the US banking corporation, and this mobile app enables users to make financial transactions, market transactions on the go. It's not the only app like this Facework, of course, but the same person, so the same financial actor, appears on television advertising, for instance, for fast food restaurant chain, and in this particular TV ad, she advertises for fried rice with scallops. Right? So, and by the mere process of this juxtaposition, having one and the same person advertising on TV for something as banal as, fried rice, and for mobile app with which you can do financial transactions, so you can do both. You can have the fried rice and do financial transactions on the go. I mean, this mere juxtaposition banalizes financial investments. It makes them, so it's a very simple act. You just have to juxtapose two activities which were considered previously separated. And you do that via this sort of media performances. So they are made to look equally ordinary, as part, ordinary in the sense of being part of everyday life. I'm saying this because it's relevant with respect to how savings, for instance, are captured and steered into financial capital, into becoming financial capital. All right? So, this being said, what should we expect to see here? First of all, as I said, as I argued before, we should expect to see the emergence of new professions and professional groups which are hybridized, in the sense of combining two types of expertise considered to be separately. On the one hand, this expressive expertise, but on the other hand, financial expertise as well, or cognitive, if you want to put it. Financial in the sense of cognitive. And we should expect members of these professions to perform, to act, right? Taking financial markets and financial activity transactions as not only as a content, but also as an occasion for these performances. With the emphasis being not on being, not on being accurate, but on individual likability and on this banalization of financial transactions. And I think that both elements, I would like to argue that both elements, likability and banalization, are essential with respect to how savings can be transformed into captured and transformed into financial capital. Why am I saying that the emphasis is not on accuracy, but on individual likability? Let me give you a couple of examples. First of all, being wrong is not bad. You have here an excerpt from one of the interviews I made with a financial journalist about another very well-known financial actor who likes to appear in his shows in costume. And he's famous for being wrong. His financial forecasts and predictions are regularly inaccurate. But this doesn't damage his popularity at all. He's popular for being wrong. And this is an indication that with respect to audiences, this sort of financial facework, if you want to put it like this, wants to attain primarily likability and not any particular form of accuracy. I have plenty of evidence about this, and I'm ready to talk more about it during the Q&A session. But not only that expressive action is prioritized, the audiences are also expected to react expressively, not primarily in a cognitive fashion. You have here an excerpt from a transcript. You know that from a TV studio, you know that TV shows can have live audiences. I'm absolutely sure that you have TV shows with live audiences here too. And before the show is broadcast live, for instance, the anchor will teach the audiences how to react. In every show, it is like this. So this is what the anchor tells audiences about their expected reactions before the show starts, right? So it's all off camera. The anchor could tell the audiences to react critically, for instance, to challenge the financial actor, or to ask for more information, or maybe to present some evidence, or anything like that. So there are several options here in the audience's reactions. It's not that these reactions can be only of one type. But the anchor tells the audiences here, well, when show this sign, everyone should pretend to understand and have the O reaction. Is it okay? Let's try this once, and then it's tried. 1, 2, 3. And let's see your reaction to this sign. And then, oh, okay, Hong Kong audiences are better than those on the mainland. They only, meaning those on the mainland, they only have a reaction of crying. So what is expected here is not necessarily a cognitive reaction or critical reaction or any sort of cognitive or informational challenge. What is expected here is an emotional reaction and an emotional rapport with the financial actor, as in every show. So the emphasis here is more on performance. The fact that the emphasis is on performance, so I'm saying all this in order to underscore my point that it's not about simply conveying information, because there are so many other possibilities there to convey information. It's about this performance. This is what the anchor tells to the studio audience, how the anchor presents the financial actor to the audience at the start of the show. So there are several ways of presenting somebody who appears in a show. You can present him as, a financial scholar. You can present that person, him or her, or you can present that person as having conducted a particular body of research, as having a particular set of knowledge, and so on and so forth. And yes, the presentation here by the anchor to the audiences before the show starts is indeed that the financial actor has a particular type of knowledge. But what is this knowledge? So the anchor says, tonight we have 2 financial actors. They went through years of training and learned from an actor prepares by the Russian theater director, Konstantin Stanislavski. They will analyze financial information to you in a different way. The presentation here emphasizes first this expressive knowledge that they went through years of training as an actor. In fact, if you look at the educational background of the vast majority of financial actors, they all have a background in finance or economics. And in spite of that, this background is not foregrounded in this presentation. It's the acting capability. So this is what is expected from them. And also what matters in these shows is this emotional retelling of events. You have here another screenshot from a TV show from several years ago, where the financial actress here, which is one of the most prominent, got shot to fame practically overnight because she was when she was crying on live TV as the stock of HSBC, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, dropped. Emotional reactions to market events are expected and appreciated in these shows, and it's part of the likability of financial actors. in many interviews, many of them have emphasized how important it is to have a rapport, to establish a rapport with their audiences and to have this acting capability. So what does this achieve? Well, during the field work, I first struggled with this question until I discovered that a good number of these financial actors, not all, but a good number of them, also fund managers. And then what they are doing on TV becomes much more relevant in the sense that achieving this sort of likability towards audiences is a means of attracting savings from parts of these audiences and transforming them into financial capital. And it is more effective than social networks, especially in the initial phases of building capital, such as building a fund, a financial fund. So in this sense, Facework, financial Facework, is a strategic resource supplanting the lack of social networks. I can talk more about this lack of social networks and why doing Facework is important. Here's another excerpt from an interview with a financial actor who was also managing a fund. And he says, well, we are competing for actually many professionals like doctors, lawyers, government officials, and they, this is my emphasis here, they will look for these people who are more famous in this field, he means financials, and try to see how they are doing. So audiences look first for likability and prominence, and knowledge about the financial performance of fund managers is subordinated to this criterion of likability. Why is it important? Remember what I said. They're indeed competing for professionals which might have a high level of savings. Remember what I put on that slide, that the average household savings over 20 years is over 29%. Quite a lot. Why do they do this? Why do they emphasize likability as a means of distinguishing themselves and of creating an identity? Well, because actual financial performance does not distinguish fund managers much from each other. We know from from many research projects and from many investigations that fund managers actually stick to each other, better said, imitate each other or herd with each other in their financial performances for a number of institutional reasons. So they do not like to, to be ahead of the herd. They stick with the herd. And this has been documented in many cases. Well, if financial managers stick with the herd, then, and there aren't many possibilities there of distinguishing them by financial performance, then the only way to distinguish them would be by their Facework performance, or what is called, what I called here, what is called financial acting, what they call financial acting in this case. The other thing which we need to take into account is this fact that financial acting is a strategic resource, supplanting lack of social networks. Capturing capital via social networks, especially in the initial phases of this capture, is very difficult because you can do only so much through your social networks. Facework is much more effective. The other aspect here is that indeed some of them lack social networks, especially social networks in mainland China, where a good part of the capital flows come from. And but they can broadcast their finance shows to mainland China, and they had also started producing shows in Mandarin and learning Mandarin for this purpose. So if you take this into account, the fact that they lack social networks extending in mainland China, producing and broadcasting these shows appears as a strategic resource to them. So, I hope I haven't gone much over time now. What is the conclusion here? As I argued, the decision to make money into financial capital is an interactive process. We need to look at it, at this transformation process, from the viewpoint, from the perspective of social interactions, and not take it as an individual, isolated choice, because it is not. And this process, this transformation, involves interactions between capital groups and their audiences. Interactions which are technologically mediated, as I said, but which also emphasize likability. Financialization of the media industries is key to this process, and I think this aspect of financialization has been neglected until now. If you look at approaches of work being done on the financialization of the firm, the emphasis has been put on industrial corporations, but not on the media industries, and this will need to change. The other argument I made is that hybridized professions combining different types of expertise, expressive and cognitive, emerge in this process. And obviously, Facework prioritizes expressivity. What is a larger takeaway point here? Well, if you look at what the sociology of markets, and especially the sociology of financial markets, has been focusing on over the last years, you can see that a lot of emphasis has been put on technology, a lot of emphasis has been put on cognitive expertise, on the emergence of professions focusing on the professional organizational positions, focusing on cognition. And these other types of expertise, such as expressive expertise, have been maybe let aside, put aside. So it's time to, reverse the focus a little bit and look more in the analysis of financial markets at how alliances with other types of industries emerge, as I said, financialization of media firms, and how these forms of expressive work are used in capturing capital flows. Again, if you look at it, if you look at this transformation work, which has been analyzed more probably from the perspective of social networks, so you also need to consider the question, what happens if social networks are insufficient or too slow, and how they are supplanted by other strategic resources, such as Facework in this case. Well, and having said all this, I'm going to stop here and take your questions. So, thank you very much.
We can take some questions. Se alguém quiser fazer perguntas em português, podemos traduzir também. Eu só vou pedir para as pessoas que quiserem fazer perguntas que venham à frente e usem o microfone, porque nós estamos transmitindo pelo YouTube. Aí, por favor, se apresentem.
Thank you, Professor Preda. My name is Eduardo. I'm here from the master's program house. I want to ask you about, you say that the emphasis is on expressive on these markets. But then again, aren't they also that way in the core markets? I say the core financial groups or the risky rating agents that I stood don't they also try to convey a serious image the same way they try to not convey this image, your subject? So well, os atores, não sei. The actors.
Yes, of course, I didn't claim in any way that only this, this new profession does Facework in the financial services industry. We know that Facework, but what we need to do here, and this hasn't been done systematically, is to investigate, systematically, as I said, various kinds of Facework being done in the financial services industry, and their consequentiality. Why are they there? Why are they doing this? I take your point. Another example here is a Facework, unrelated to what I've said, is the so-called opening of a trading, so the ringing of a bell, which is done regularly. But all the trading is electronic, so there is no bell. Why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense, but it's also just for Facework. There are other types of Facework as well. For instance, CEOs have corporations, I'm pretty sure here in Brazil as well, have regular calls with analysts where they do exactly the same type of work, Facework for analysts. They try to put on a show for their benefit. So no, it's not the only type of Facework they are doing. Clearly, I'm not claiming that. All I'm saying is that I'm drawing attention to this aspect, which has been in to my mind, under-investigated until now. And yes, I'm calling for more systematic investigation of its various forms and of its consequences.
Thank you, Alex Preda. So sorry for my bad English, but I will try to. So I would like to listen more about the historical context of the construction of this banalization of the role of and the role of the states in this process. It's in Hong Kong, when it starts and this kind of.
Well, of course, I do believe that the role of a state plays a significant role in this process, and it has to do with a transformation of the welfare state and all its provisions towards old age, and this shift, which has been analytically investigating towards replacing responsibility here for such welfare provisions, shifting the responsibilities from the state to the individual. So in order to shift these responsibilities from the state to the individual, you have to reconfigure individual savings as a form of capital, among others financial capital, with the expectation that this capital will provide flows of income in the future. So the state goes away from its welfare responsibilities, which it has assumed earlier, and shifts them to the individual. But in order to do this effectively, you have to redefine savings into something else. Right? And in order to redefine the savings into something else, this something else has to be represented, if you want to put it like, or redefined as part of everyday life, as something very banal, which everybody does. Not only beneficial, but also banal, as part of everyday life, unlikable. And this means going away from this image, yes, image is not the right word, from this representation of financial transactions as being hard to comprehend, as being difficult, as being the domain of experts, because if they have a domain of experts, how can you, as an ordinary citizen, be expected to do them? Whereas if you redefine the entire constellation and you say, well, it's banal, it's likable, it's even fun, and it's part of everyday life, and it's beneficial too, then we redefine not only the individual, but also the everyday activities. So yes, the state plays a significant role here in Hong Kong. For instance, the government is very active, subsidizes trading classes to 80%, which provides a source of income not only for the traders and brokerages teaching them, but also makes it attractive to ordinary citizens to take such classes, because they are subsidized by the government. And we can see this process as intrinsic to the shifting of responsibilities.
Hi, my name is Carl Schneider. I work at a bank regulator in the United States. So I came here interested in, because the FOMC does a lot of this kind of face work. So kind of learning more from the perspective of Hong Kong. The thing that scares me is this move of moving financial products into the same realm as consumer products, because we've seen this already with payday loans in the United States, just this massive increase kind of because there's this false equivalency. Is there a way to reverse this trend besides government action? Or I'm not calling for government action, but what do you see as kind of the future in this realm? More consumerization. I'm interested to hear if you see any difference between the Hong Kong market and other Western markets in this kind of trend. And thank you. I was very interested.
Well, no, actually, to be very honest with you, I agree with the fact that it's very problematic, very, very problematic. But I also actually see Hong Kong, not only the other Asian states as well, as a forerunner in this respect. It's just that Hong Kong is probably more advanced in this respect than Western European countries or North American countries, for a number of reasons, and we can explain them. For instance, the welfare state was never very, very strong in Hong Kong. In other Asian countries, the welfare state doesn't make strong provisions. But we see very similar phenomena happening, at least in the United Kingdom now, under the banner of taking individual responsibility, of planning for one's own future, and so on and so forth. We see that all the time. Is it problematic and risky? Yes, of course it's problematic and risky. It's problematic and risky not only because of a so-called, let me rephrase here. So this argument that ordinary citizens cannot reach the required degree of expertise, I don't know very much about that, but it's problematic because we have empirical studies and quantitative studies showing time and time and time again that the majority of investors and traders lose money in the market. I think this is incontrovertible. There are too many studies around, and as I said, quantitative studies showing this. And if you have these studies have accumulated over at least since the 1990s, so let's say about 30 years now, give or take. And taking this into account, you cannot take markets actually as a substitute for the welfare provisions of the state. It's as simple as that. It's not because, of supposed cognitive limits or biases, if you want to put it like this, of ordinary citizens, by far not. It's because the evidence shows that the majority of market participants lose money in the market in the long run. And that's it, period. So it's very problematic.
Hello, Professor. Thank you for the lecture. So I'm Wagner Navarro. I'm a PhD student in geography, human geography. And in my work, I try to understand a little about the speciality of financial information. And I think about what's the difference of financial information here in Brazil to other countries. So what I want to ask you is, what difference you see between the financial Facework in Hong Kong, in the United States, United Kingdom, and a country such as Brazil? Because in Brazil, for instance, we have, for one side, we have some initiatives on financial education in the population, but it has very little effect. And on the other side, we have some brokerage firms with very aggressive strategies, using YouTube videos, telling about catastrophic scenario in Brazil. So, telling investors to invest in dollar in the stock market based on this catastrophic scenario with some videos and explosions and all this kind of stuff. So I think I started to think, what's the difference between a country such a place like Hong Kong, very used to invest with many investors and very educated in finance, and Brazil, which is a very different case with an economic disparity and not such a tradition in finance.
Well, thanks for this. So first of all, I think that there are variations across countries in in this rhetoric of the necessity to invest, so that this, what you want to call discourse, is not homogeneous. It's contextual and it's locally adapted. So there will not be, we shouldn't expect to see two places which use exactly the same rhetoric. The fact that here in Brazil, the rhetoric emphasizes this, but they emphasize emotions too, only different emotions. It can be panic, and from what you're telling me, I understand that this is what they do here. It can be the sense of danger and insecurity, and it can be the fact that financial investments are presented as a salvation or the only way out of this insecurity, whereas in other contexts, depending on a number of factors, the rhetoric can take a different path. It can emphasize more family. It can emphasize more common obligations. It can emphasize various factors. It can emphasize individual responsibility and so on and so forth. So we have, yes, we have variation across this discursive, what you would call discursive formats. We cannot expect to see a generalized format absolutely everywhere, because that will not work. I was yesterday at this conference on financial literacy, and we were before starting the talk, Andre and I were talking about this. We see more and more studies, quantitative studies, showing that this formal financial education doesn't work. It's as simple as that. It just does not work. So, in many respects, and it's not effective in the sense that it doesn't lead automatically to behavioral changes. You learn the notions abstractly, and you just know them, and that's it. But you continue doing what you were doing before. It's like learning a set of differential equations. You know them, but do you do what you're doing based on solving differential equations all the time? No, of course not. You know, so in this respect, it doesn't work, but look at what this Facework is doing. Do they emphasize this formal knowledge? No, not at all. They emphasize likability, they emphasize emotion, they emphasize this sort of expressive aspects and not the formal cognitive aspects. I don't mean to say that the formal cognitive aspects are completely absent, they are not, but they are subordinated to expression. And you can also see that a lot of discourse is in this sense about the necessity to invest and so on and so forth, mobilize emotions. Only not the same set everywhere, because that wouldn't make sense. So we have local variations according to context.
If no one else wants to, I will use my prerogatives. That's the good thing about inviting people. You can make questions. Yeah, I was really interested in listening more. You have highlighted the importance of likability, but I'm assuming here that likability might assume very different actual contents in different cultural settings. So I was wondering if your analysis includes the actual expressive displays that leads to likability, and if you are also working with the audience to see how they are receiving these and how they are reacting to these.
Yep. Actually, I didn't mention that in the talk. So there is a paper on which this talk is based, and the paper has, yes, obviously more information because it's a paper. I interviewed audiences of such shows about how they judge the actors, and likability was one of the major factors. How they look like. The other factor is that TV producers make actors wear the same outfit time and time again. So if you're a male financial actor, the TV producer will tell you to wear exactly the same suit and the same time and the same shirt time and time again, so that the audiences can recognize you. They can distinguish you from other actors. The fact that and female actors do the same. The fact that they are popular with audiences, I have seen that several times with my own eyes. I was doing once, and that was relatively recent, a little more than a year ago, an interview with two financial actors in a man and a woman in a public place, in a restaurant over lunch, and then from another table, a group of people, it came out they were doctors from a nearby hospital, came to our table to say hello to our financial actors and to tell the female actress, to tell the actress how great she was in the talk she gave at the hospital. And I saw several times when I was with them walking down the street, they were being stopped by people on the street to say hello and how you're doing. And so they enjoy indeed this degree of popularity, clearly. And they also take care of their appearances. I don't mean here in the in the ordinary sense of the word. They take care that the way they appear in public on television is distinct and distinguishable from the ways in which other actors appear. So in the same way in which, let's say, a popular film actor would appear, would have a distinct appearance, they too have a distinct appearance. I also interviewed audiences who were telling me that, to their surprise, they were So somebody was telling me in a recent conversation, actually 3 weeks ago, she saw perchance in Hong Kong financial actor, known financial actor in a cafe, in an everyday posture where that person wasn't wearing a suit. It was in a totally private occasion, right? And then she was thinking, she tells me, oh, his appearance was so different from that of the TV. I wonder whether I should follow his advice or not. So this sort of appearance and maintaining this likability apparently counts. The audiences shouldn't see you, so to speak, in private. You have a public persona. Yeah.
Okay, then. Once again, many thanks for your talk. And yeah, thank you all for coming as well.